Now, it was billed as social media's big tobacco moment. Last week, we told you about the coalition of 29 US states suing tech giant Meta, accusing it of deliberately developing apps that harmed children's mental health. But after 5 days of hearings, the parent company of Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp agreed to settle the case without admitting any wrongdoing. So let's break it down and take a look at some of what Meta has agreed to change on its apps for kids and teenagers in the United States. Now, they say that they will impose a 2-hour time limit across Facebook and Instagram. There'll be no more notifications during school hours and between midnight and 6 a.m. They're also promising to hide all the likes on posts and on content, and there'll be an option to turn off autoplay and no more extreme cosmetic or makeup filters. Now, these are just some of Meta's proposed changes to Instagram and Facebook for teens, but it only applies in the United States. So let's now look at the financial outlay for Meta in this settlement. How much are they going to pay? Well, the tech giant will pay all US states and territories, not just the ones named in the lawsuit, a total of 25 billion Australian dollars over the next 10 years or so. But Meta says that it will withhold 30% of this total payout until its rivals get on board with the same restrictions. Why? Well, in giving a reason for this, Meta's chief legal officer, CJ Mahoney, said that because teens move fluidly across dozens of apps, we need an industry-wide solution. We therefore call on our industry peers, TikTok and YouTube, to implement this new framework right away. Interesting. So let's now delve into this legal outcome with Professor Jeannie Patterson, who's the co-director of the Centre for AI and Digital Ethics at the University of Melbourne. Jeannie, it's always great to have you back on Weekend Breakfast. Jeannie, we spoke to you last week, of course, just as the trial was getting underway. 5 days on, there's a settlement out of court. Now, Meta says has not admitted to any wrongdoing at all, but in the court of public opinion, surely this must look like an admission of guilt.
Meta's framing it as moves to greater responsibility in the light of changed circumstances, I think. And importantly, I think we need to remember there's a number of ongoing cases where Meta is being accused of negligence and causing harm to individual young people and indeed adults. And this case means that that ongoing litigation doesn't have an admission of liability. Those cases are going to have to still prove wrongdoing and harm.
Very interesting. Now, we just outlined there the kind of changes that Meta is proposing to both Instagram and to Facebook as well to protect the privacy and well-being of children and teenagers. You've had a look at those proposed changes as well. How much do you think that's actually going to change things for kids?
I think it's going to change things for kids quite a bit in the US. Their time online is going to be restricted, on social media is going to be restricted. The cosmetic procedure apps are being removed. Social media will be turned off overnight. And interestingly, there's very high expectations for age verification of users. If you remember, in Australia, we still have about 2/3 of kids on social media despite age verification laws. Well, the US is imposing quite strict requirements on age verification. Under 13s shouldn't be on social media, and 13s to 17s need to have their age verified within quite a short period of time so that those protective restrictions can be imposed.
As you say, and I find this very interesting, that these restrictions are only going to be imposed in the United States, but would you say that these proposed changes are actually perhaps better, perhaps more effective than the current under 16 social media bans that we're seeing Australia has implemented and several other countries have adopted?
I think it's really interesting. Several other countries have quite proactive duty of care obligations for social media companies. And these new rules in the US, or these new undertakings in the US, show us something about what the content of duty of care for online interactions might look like. Now, Australia at the moment is debating whether we should introduce a digital duty of care for social media companies. And I think these new US rules show us something about what that might look like, and something that might have a more proactive response to the harms we know are impacting Australian young people.
Okay, so that being the case, going back to this case then, is there something that the Australian government could take away from, could tap into in order to strengthen the under-16 social media ban?
Well, there's two things here. As I mentioned, 2/3 of young people are still using social media. They haven't been identified as underage. They haven't been age verified. And to this point in time, social media companies have just been going, it's really hard, we can't identify them. These new US laws put expectations that no more than 10% of 16 to 17-year-olds will remain wrongly identified as adults, and that 3% of the younger 13 to 16-year-olds won't be wrongly identified, and therefore those protective measures can come into place. So this is not a social media ban, as you mentioned, but it depends on effective age identification, which then introduces those protective features that I suspect those countries with digital duties of care can now have an expectation those protections will be rolled out.
We also heard there Meta calling on its rivals YouTube and TikTok as well to implement similar schemes, similar protections as well. How do you think other social media platforms are watching this case? What can they take away?
Well, I think other social media platforms are watching very carefully. Other social media platforms have also been the subject of litigation for harm to young people and indeed adults. The other social media companies have tended to settle the actions, what Meta's done in this case. I think they'll be watching carefully, and I would actually hope they sign on. Maybe that's because they're altruistic, they want to do the best for young people, and maybe they recognise that if they don't sign on, the litigation will continue, and they'll end up having to pay more and change more. So it might be a business decision as much as a sort of social licence decision.